The Panic of 1893 caused the United States to struggle financially at a government and individual level. The Panic of 1893 began when the stock market collapsed in mid-February of that year. Waves of stockholders quickly sold their shares so they could invest their money in gold before the economy fully crashed. The panic had been one, if not the worst, the country has ever seen, with the Treasury's reserve dipping under $100 million for the first time in 2 decades. Like every person that lived through the Panic of 1893, a sand quarry owner from Ohio named Jacob Coxey felt that there was an injustice done upon the American people. The United States government didn't properly assist its workers during or after the panic that plagued the country. In 1894, Coxey, along with working class citizens, felt they weren't being aided by the government. Jacob Coxey proposed a bill that would authorize the United States government to print $500 million. With this $500 million, the government would be paying for jobs for the unemployed workers of America. These jobs would mainly be constructing roads across the country. The bill, which was called Coxey's Good Road Bill, was submitted to Congress as he led his march on Washington, D.C. After a tiresome march, Coxey's army pushed its way through the Capitol. As Coxey himself reached the stairs of the Capitol building, he was clubbed by the police and immediately arrested. Soon after, he was sentenced to 20 days in jail for trespassing. Though Coxey's army itself wasn't successful, it sparked an uproar across the country. The uproar of Coxey's army influenced strikes such as the Pullman Strike. The Pullman Strike was the biggest in the United States history. The Pullman Palace Car Company made many unfair wage cuts and didn't take care of its workers. Therefore, a strike started against the company. The American Railway Union joined the Pullman Strike and wouldn't let any train that had a car from the Pullman Palace Car Company use its railroads. Once the American Railway Union wouldn't let trains with a Pullman Company car attached to it use its lines, the western half of the country shut down. Factories closed and livestock couldn't reach the market. People across America fought for the worker, and Coxey's army provided a great influence on that of the Pullman Strike and many other strikes as well. Coxey's army is an example of populism. Populism is the support of concerns for ordinary people. A populace believes these principles, obviously, and Coxey showed these beliefs through the army that he led. Coxey's army demonstrates this by Jacob Coxey and the people behind him fighting for the government to supply the jobs with jobless. Coxey has the interest of the average person in mind when he takes his march on Washington, D.C. Many of the unions and strikes that occurred during the industrial development of the country also showed populism through fighting for what's best for the common worker or person. Now here's a short video giving a quick summary of Coxey's army.
In 1893, when the Depression hit, there was an increased number of labor versus business strikes across the country. Unfortunately for labor unions, the government always sided with the management because supporting the employees brought no benefit to the federal government. Frustrated by the lack of aid from the government, Jacob Coxey, a businessman from Ohio, led several hundred men, Coxey's army, on a march to Washington, D.C., demanding economic relief. Coxey's demand went unanswered, but was supported by a third party, the Populist Party.